Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have Gaia Trincucci here today with us. So she's a scientific editor of the Journal of Experimental Medicine, which is one of the key players in different aspects of immunology, but they're expanding to other fields. So she's a PhD who did a postdoc in the US, so wide background, and the reason we invited her to give a talk is to have a kind of a perspective of the publication process of the scientific journal. So there's some trainees that were interested to understand what can I improve or what can I do to make the process likely for my paper to get published. So we thought that your perspective would be very useful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this site visit. I'm really grateful to be here today and to connect with you. So please interrupt me anytime if you have questions. That's a conversation, so I'll be happy to answer to your questions. I just would like to point out that JM is, so the Journal of Experimental Medicine has been around since quite a while. So it's an historical journal. It was the first issue of JM was actually issued in 1896 when JM was part of Johns Hopkins, and then JM entered Rockefeller University, and the first issue published in Rockefeller University was in 1905. Then along the way, we also actually other sister journals joined the Rockefeller University. So we have the Journal of General Physiology and the Journal of Cell Biology. I will touch base about these two journals, but of course, since I'm a scientific editor at JM, my presentation will be mainly focused on JM. But please, if you want to connect with anybody in this, other two journals, let me know. So in 1958, we officially became Rockefeller University Press. And recently, so last year, a new journal has been launched, which is called Life Science Alliance, and I'm going to have a slide about that in a minute. So this is how our Rockefeller University Press journal look like. I'm going to talk about JM, but just to touch base, JCB is, the focus of JCB is cell biology, of course, and also molecular biology, and JGP is a little bit more focus on physiology and again molecular biology. So they are all academic journals, which I'll explain as well in my presentation. So there is a basically our press is a little bit different as other journals because there is a big interplay between professional editors, professional scientific editor like me, and a group of what we call academic editors, which are principal investigators that are active in their field. And the decision regarding the manuscript really comes because of an interaction between these two group of people. So just a brief, information about Life Science Alliance is our most recent journal addition to the Rockefeller University Press. So Life Science Alliance was launched through a collaboration with also Envo Press and Cold Spring Harbor Press. It's a completely open access journal. The topics is quite wide, so there is like a wide variety of topics that are covered by this journal. And as you can, so compared to other Rockefeller University Press journal, this journal asks for a little bit less advanced compared to what I'm going to show you, for example, for JM. So if you have any question regarding Life Science Alliance, please let me know. I will be happy to put you in contact with Andrea, which is the executive editor there, and she will be happy to connect with you and answer all your questions. So, of course, the first question would be why, while deciding where to submit the paper, why would be a journal at Rockefeller University Press a good choice? So, as I said, we work also with academic editors, so it's kind of a your community of scientists is also part of our press, and it's it's kind of a welcoming idea if you think that scientists are still actively working, at the bench, let's say, participate to the evaluation of the paper. Then we offer a neutral format, so you can submit to us in any format you prefer, and the format is not going to impact basically the assessment of the paper or any opinion we have on the paper. And then lastly, we launched in the last 2 years, a very easy way to transfer within the journal in the press, but most importantly, from outside to the press. I'm going to touch base more on this transfer process because we see that it's working very well, so I think it could be interesting to speed up the publication process for the scientists too. So now what about JM? As been said, so JM historically is well known as the immunology journal, but in the recent past we also expanded into different other fields like cancer biology, vascular biology, host-pathogen interaction, neuroscience, neurobiology, stem cells biology, but also we really welcome and we want really to make the point that we really welcome human studies. So JM was very well known to focus on preclinical models, but definitely human studies are of high value and interest for JM. So we have different type of articles that either we receive or we commission. So in let's say in pink are the articles that the type of format that you could pick when you want to submit something to us. So research articles are the biggest format we have. So it's 10 figures, 40,000 characters. The main point here is that we really stress it about advance, and also we would like to see some mechanism as well. Instead, if you have a cool finding, which is a little bit preliminary, that is not too much advanced, but you still want the community is aware of these new findings, you can pick, for example, a brief definitive report. So the BDR is a smaller format, it's 20,000 characters and 5 figures. And there, the novelty is still the main point, but regarding mechanism, we are asking a bit less. So we understand that sometimes projects can take a while, so this could be a format in case you would like to have something out, in the preliminary situation. And then we have this third format, which is called the technical advance or resource paper. So in the technical advance, as the name says itself, we focus on technical things that could be very important for the field and could be useful for some advances could be important on a technical point of view. And the resource paper instead, we mean for example, now there are a lot of data sets that are available, and if you would like to make the data set available and of course adding a story about it, but someone else could also pick up from the data sets other aspect of it, you can go for a resource paper. So it's a more, let's say, more of a descriptive type of studies compared to a research article or brief definitive reports. And then in green are all the formats that we commission. So regarding review and perspective, so that's mainly we commission reviews. But if you have an idea of something interesting that you would like to write a review about, please contact us. Please reach out, because we are we are happy to to have reviews that are submitted to us from the outside, and we don't have to commission them. So for reviews, we have it's again quite a large format, so 40,000 characters, and there are no limitation in terms of citations. And perspective instead are reviews, but with a little bit more of a personal angle. So it's the same size, let's say, of the manuscript, but the angle is a little bit different. Then we have a smaller format. So for farming translation, we focus on something that is basically interesting from the bench to the translational medicine. So anything that is related to new findings, new drugs, new preclinical models, anything that could be interesting in the context, for example, of biotech companies as well. And then we have insights, which are usually commissioned to highlight a manuscript that is going to be published in the same issue. So insights goes together with the manuscript that is, of course, associated with. In this case, we asked the author to highlight why that specific manuscript is important in the field, which sort of relevance has for the field. Then we have viewpoints, which are more of a discussion about topics that are interesting also for the general public. For example, we had a recent one on vaccination and anti-vaxxers and so. And then where people have an idea, instead which is more of an interview-based paper, like piece, let's say. So people basically discuss their experience in terms of scientific background, why they decided to go into science, what are the future goals, and that's more like a interview type of article. If you have any questions, please let me know. So I think you could be interesting to know how the decision process work at JM, because it's kind of a little bit different from what happens for other journals. So this is our team. So we are a team of 6 editors. Teodoro Pulvirenti is our executive editor. He was before at JM as a scientific editor. He went to Nature Cell Biology, and then he moved back to JM as executive editor. Alejo is our senior editor, and then Shachi, Stephanie, Cindy, and me are the scientific editors. We all have different backgrounds. Some are overlapping, but we try to cover with our expertise all the topic of the journal. And as I mentioned, together with this group of scientific editors, we work in close collaboration with a group of academic editors. We have 13 academic editors, which are not necessarily based at Rockefeller University Press. Actually, most of them are not at Rockefeller University Press. And really, we have a very good feedback between the two groups to assess the manuscript and in all the stages of the editorial process. So a few sort of idea of how fast the process is. So we try to be very efficient to make this process easy for the authors. So when a paper comes to us, in between 5 days or a week, we are able to send out a letter saying, okay, we are interested in this paper or not. So in this case, if the paper is rejected at the editorial level, you are kind of having this communication very fast, so you can go to another journal. Instead, if you are interested in the paper and the paper is sent out for review, we try to make it also in a very timely way. So we try to get the comments of the reviewers and also our decision in roughly 35-40 days. You have to imagine that somehow is not so, sometimes is not so easy because reviewers either are difficult to find or they don't turn in the comments. So it depends on us, but also depends on other people. So, but roughly we try to keep it between 35 and 40 days. And then, our first screen could look a little bit harsh, so around 20% of the paper that are submitted to us are gonna be sent out for review. But when a paper is sent out for review, it has a very high chance to be accepted. So it's around 95-96% of the paper that are sent out for review, and at the end of the day are gonna be accepted. So in more details, how this process works. So when a manuscript comes to the press, is assigned to a scientific editor, and there are also secondary editors that are going to look at the paper, and also Theo, so our executive editor, is going to give his opinion. So we basically finalize an opinion on the paper, and then the paper is also assigned to an academic editor who independently assesses the paper, and then we have a system to sort of compare our notes and comments and finalize an opinion on the paper, like either we are interested or not. If we are interested, we send it out for review, and the peer review process starts. And again, like I said, in 35-40 days, we try to get back the comments and, to assess the paper. So when the comment comes back, the whole process starts again. So let's say I would look at the comments, other colleague of mine would look at the comments. Also, the academic editor was initially, assigned to the paper. We look at the comments. We again have let's say, a collegial decision regarding the paper, and then we send you an informed decision about that, which can be a rejection or can be an invite. So what we call invite means that we want the paper back with the revised version of the paper. So if we get the revised version, again, this process starts one more time. I will look at the revised version, the academic editor will look at the revised version, we again compare our notes and comments, and then we finalize our decision. And so the paper is going to be online in 1 or 2 days, and then we have a way to basically do a big outreach and make the paper known to the public. So maybe a little bit more details of what is the life of the manuscript through peer review and how we deal with it at JM. So generally, the first thing we receive is like a cover letter together with the manuscript. So cover letters are actually interesting and important, at least to present, to give an idea of what is the core interest, core message of the paper. So in the cover letter, you can also indicate, for example, if you have any competition. It's good to know because we can expedite the process if, in case you feel that the process must be faster because of competition. Then sometimes there are co-submissions. It's good to know that there is a co-submission because, again, the two manuscripts can be, for example, assigned to the same reviewers, or if they are not, so it's going to be more complicated than to come back and have the two papers submitted together and also published together eventually if they're going to pass peer review. So in the cover letter, you can also clearly state if your findings are gonna solve the controversy or something that is, like an unclear point in the field. Or you can suggest exclude referees. You can also do it through our system, so we know which referees you don't want to. So we, most of we are gonna respect your decision in terms of referees that are gonna be excluded. For the suggested one, sometimes it's not so easy because we have to, you will see in a minute, we have to be sure that there are no conflicts. So we try to avoid as much as we can people that collaborated before with the authors or, different points. So, but for the excluded reviewers, as soon as, let's say, someone does exclude like 20 names of the field, which then it gets a little bit difficult to find reviewers, then we are going to try to accommodate your request. Then what about so basically when we, so how do we decide if a paper goes out for peer review? So first of all, we focus on advance. So advance is key for us, either in a BDR or in a research article, as well as in a resource paper. Then, as you can imagine from the type of journal we are, so it's a broad journal, so we wanted the topic of the study or the findings are important for a wide number of researchers. Then we really strive for solidity and to have something that is high quality. And then, of course, we look at, sorry about that. If there is competition in the field, so if there's some sort of a hot topic, of course, that's something that we are, willing to publish even more. Then, regarding the referee selection, so that's a, kind of a point that could be very interesting for if people don't know how this happened generally. So, of course, the first point is that we select quite obviously someone regarding the topic. Sometimes, we get a lot of papers that are multidisciplinary, so we need to have, so we work with 3 reviewers. We try to have 3 reviewers. Sometimes if one of the reviewers doesn't turn in the comments and it takes forever to get the comments back, we are going to move forward with 2, but it's very rare. So generally we try to have 3 reviewers of 3 comments of 3 reviewers, and in the selection of the reviewers we really account for the different expertise that we are going to need to assess the paper, especially if it's multiple disciplines are involved. Then conflict of interest, as I said before, so we try to avoid anything that is anybody that had a sort of a relationship like a mentor-mentee relationship before, let's say in the last 7-8 years. So sometimes it's difficult, so but we try to avoid this as much as we can. Or as well, if someone is in the same institution as the person that submitted, we try to avoid this because we want to have a more fair assessment as we can. And as well, close collaborator too, and also, of course, if they acknowledge to contribute technically or in some way to the paper, they're going to be excluded. So then when we get the comments, of course, based on the comments, we are going to decide if the paper is going to be rejected or invited by us. So first of all, we have a look at the enthusiasm of the reviewers. If the reviewers are highly enthusiastic, so that's a good point for us to say, okay, well, the manuscript is well received and has value. Then, of course, we look at the comments of the reviewers very carefully, and if there are some like comments that are some technical issues or things that are highlighted, this is something that can go into the balance in deciding to reject a manuscript or keeping it. And that's, of course, the major flaws, and also how long this manuscript will need to be revised and sort of, they will come back to us, because if it's too long, or like, for example, there is a major issue with a manuscript which basically will need to redo the entire set of experiments, this is not really feasible for us. If it's something that is doable in a timely fashion, let's say in a certain number of months, then it's okay. But if it's really like the paper must to be completely revised and completely changed, then it's something that would go more towards the rejection time. I would like to mention, and we don't have a time line for resubmission. So to submit a revised version, because we accept any timeline. Of course, we are going to check in like 3 months if everything is going well, or if you need more time and something like this. But if you come back to us in 1.5 years, probably we are going to consider the manuscript as a new submission, because the literature has changed. Everything, maybe finding this was new 1.5 years ago, then is not new anymore. So keep in mind that it's still good to have a certain number of months, but not too long. And then sometimes we also decide to, so we look at the comments of the reviewers, and if the reviewers are asking for something that's definitely beyond the scope, we clearly make this communication in the letter. We also advise the authors to reach out to us in case you want to more details about the comments on the review and everything, because communication with between the authors and the editors is very important, also to make clear what are the key elements that are required to the journal for publication. So basically, when a paper is invited, we like the paper. The reviewers are excited, and we can have 2 different types of invitations. So a more like, yes, do this, and then come back to us, everything is okay. So it's like sort of an invite with major revision. It's very tough to have very minor changes. So generally, there is always something to do, but there are situations in which minor changes are only required, so the paper is easily accepted. And then we have a second type of invite, which is a more of a stringent type of invite, in which we say, okay, there was enthusiasm, but there are also some issues that have to be solved, so that we are basically, so unless you don't do this, we are not going to publish it. So it's still a sort of a way to make the authors aware that we are interested in the manuscript, but some parts of the paper must be fixed before consideration for acceptance. And then, of course, the decline, I'm not going to say because it's a rejection, so it's sad, sorry, communication. So when you prepare your point-by-point rebuttal, that's not, the first point is kind of important, I would say. So be nice and professional, not only in the rebuttal, but also, I would say, when you're communicating with us, because sometimes it's a tough job on the personal point of view sometimes, so people can be very angry. So maybe if you are unhappy with some of the decision, maybe breathe, have a coffee, answer the next day, and everything is gonna be fine. I also had some quite rough communication with authors, so I'm sorry, we are not gonna judge you as a scientist, but just that the paper is not fitting our journal, so it doesn't mean that your science is not good or you are not good as a professional. So it's just the fitting of the journal, of the paper for the journal. That's kind of, everybody that went through a revision knows that it's best to copy paste the comments of the reviewers and then don't sort of interpret what the reviewers wants to tell you. And then if, for example, to answer a question, some attempts, so you do some experiments, but experiments don't work, please we know that science is not straightforward, and we were all scientists before, so, and we know it's not easy, so if there is a reason why the experiments don't work, please tell us, and then the reviewers will know that an attempt was made, but sometimes things don't work. Then if you have additional data, either you can include them in the letter or you can put them in the manuscript, just make us aware that you did them. And I just would like to point out that we allow only one round of revision, so there are no multiple rounds of revision for us. So when we, if the revised version comes back, it's going to be evaluated. Then, so sometimes if the decision is not, let's say you're not happy with the decision, of course you are allowed to appeal. We allow only one appeal per manuscript, and I would just to point out when would be good to appeal and when is not so good to appeal. So if there are some things that we really missed, or like one of the reviewers was really unfair and you feel that the communication with you was not fair, so please reach out to us. But if there is in our letter a sort of, we point out that there is a lack of novelty, or a mechanism that is not developed enough for us, it's not a good idea to appeal, because our decision probably is not going to change. So keep in mind that when we decide, so the appeal basically takes 2 weeks to be, maximum 2 weeks to be assessed. So again, this process starts again. So I'm going to look at the paper again. I'm going to look at your comments. If you include data, it's even better, because it means that, you want it to communicate something to us, not just we are not happy with the decision, but include some references or new data that could solidify your appeal. And then again, this goes to the academic editor, and again there is a collegial decision about that. So if we decide to grant an appeal, then your paper is gonna go through peer review again, or like we consider in the.
Gaia, do you have an estimate of what percentage of the appeals they finally get?
I don't have this data, but so I would say that appeals that come as a rejection, editorial rejection, it's very rare that they're gonna go through. I mean, sometimes it happens, but it's sometimes the post-review decision could be more probable. Let's say if there are new data, for example, if to sustain the appeal. I don't have the sorry. If it's at editorial level, since we go through all this process, it's tough to revert the decision. But you're welcome to try, of course, if any time would happen. And I also wanted to mention that when we do sort of a rejection at the editorial level, we can also have a rejection we call open door. So meaning that in the letter, it's stated that if you would do, like add data on that specific area or include some data, like with some details, we are willing to send it out for review. So there is some open, also in the rejection letter, there is not just, okay, we reject the paper, that's it. There is always a motivation why we are doing it. And in case there is an open door, we always, we see value in the paper, but maybe it's too preliminary for us. So if you come back with some more data, maybe it's going to be considered further. Then, so we had a lot of changes in the last 3 years, apart from our executive editor, but there was a sort of a idea to change JM towards a more welcoming journal for for the authors. And one point I would like to make is about the neutral format, I already told you, and the transfer policy. So, and also our publication fees. So for neutral format, again, anything you have. Of course, if the figures are nicer, it's easier because it's easier to read the paper. So keep in mind that someone else has to read your data, so it's nice if at least it's readable and easy to go through the paper. For the publication fees, so we have a 2,000 publication fee, and data will be available to the public after 6 months. Then we have a sort of a golden access fee, which is of 5,000, and in this case we sort of have an open access flat fee, so your data will be open access. And in either choice, the data will be, the paper will be available in days on our website, and will be we have a staff that is doing the outreach as well. Then for the transfer policy, this is kind of working very well for us because. As I said, the transfer can be inside the press, but it's rare because we don't really overlap in terms of, scope and, sometimes with JCB, but if it's more molecular, they would go directly to JCB and they won't come, maybe to JM or like more cellular biology based. But what works well is also transfer from other journals to us. So what we need is basically the original decision letter, the full comment of the reviewers, and the point-by-point rebuttal. So we are going to get all this information, and in a 2 weeks' time, we are going to tell you if this manuscript would fit JM or not. So we don't ask for another round of review. Sometimes we need expertise outside the board because we cannot cover all the topics, even though our board is quite, there's a variety of PIs, but sometimes we don't have the expertise. And in 2 weeks' time, you're going to know if the paper is. So basically, we don't. Maybe we ask for something, but not that much, because when we ask either the people on the board or the people outside the board, we ask for a do not raise the bar opinion. So is the manuscript in this stage good for JM, proper for JM, and enough for JM? So this is working very well, also for in case people go through multiple rounds of revision and they kind of need to get it out, and the paper is solid enough, but they don't want to do another round of revision, for example.
So, Gaia, just to be clear,
yes.
If someone chooses that option and they forward to you the comments from a different journal, do those comments need to have been addressed with additional experiments?
So we
or a plan to do experiments, or you need the revision in response to those comments?
Revision and response, if you have data, is fine, because sometimes, in the rebuttal, people include also some data, but sometimes we ask for, let's say if you send it to another journal, you're not happy with, it's a rejection, but you didn't have, like most room for doing much because you just got a rejection and it didn't go to another round of review. Of course, add the comments, and then we are going to evaluate the comments, and maybe we are going to ask, okay, I think this point would be nice to have to solidify, but it's not going to be, okay, do the entire, revision and stuff like that. And sometimes, what different journals, like the scope and the bar of different journals is different. So maybe what is more, not appropriate for other journals could be perfect for JM. So just keep in mind that this could be an option, and the decision is very timely. So I would really, advise you to use this option in case. Okay, that's just to tell you that, some of our papers are being covered also by, newspapers and the press, and also we have altimetrics on our, papers, so we know if the paper is going to be like retweet many times or like outreached. And this is where we are. So we are actually up here. Second floor over there, so we don't have quite of a view as you do, but it's we are not on campus, not on Rockefeller University campus. We are between 3rd Avenue and 57. So yes, if you have any question, I'm happy to. I have some flyers here in case people want to.
questions? Yeah.
Yes.
So you said that processing the manuscript is different in a journal compared to the other journal. What are the differences?
So, because if academic journal has like the board of executive editors, but sorry, the academic editors, other journals don't have this close collaboration with like a group of academic editors are working together. So that's the major point.
This is the quality of editor.
I don't know. So I'll be honest. I am not gonna say that other journals don't have quality, but it's just the process is different. So it's more like a collegial decision instead of having an editor that is gonna say, oh yes, maybe you are a scientific editor and you relate to your executive editor, for example, for a decision. So the decision between the two of you, maybe you ask some help, but you don't have like. So I can actually email like anybody on the board, or we have a system in place, and if I need an eye or a second academic editor looking at this because we are not sure that it's okay, so it's a lot of help from them too.
Contrary to other journals, the answer, I mean the reply to author doesn't belong to only one editor.
No.
It's a team decision.
Yes, of course, there will be an editor that is handling the manuscript because, of course, it's signed. So if you would get an email from me, but the email is not just my idea. So it's an idea behind that is a collegial decision. Yes, it's never like one person decision. Apart from, for when you do pre-submission, so it's me and the executive editor looking at it. So it's like an editorial point. So for pre-submissions, just for the scope and if this manuscript is fitting the scope of GM, we don't need to ask for an academic editor because we know how the scope is. So it's not going to be, that's why it's so fast.
So I'm sure if you ask 5 scientists their opinion, you'll get 10 complaints. But,
Yes.
One issue, and I wonder if you could comment on this, is how much editorial freedom an editor has. Let me give you an example. For the top journals, they'll sometimes send it to 4 or 5 reviewers. With that, it's inevitable that there's always at least one reviewer who just digs his or her heels in. And my experience has been more often than not, the editor is just rubber stamp that. Instead of saying, hey guys, you got 4 good reviews, we're going to let you, So do you have that kind of freedom, and what are the considerations that will give you the freedom to say, we're going to ignore this 5th reviewer, it's a really solid work, our editors like it, 4 of the reviewers like it?
So we do have the freedom, so sometimes it happens. So the plus point of having academic editors, is that we can discuss the manuscript with the whole panel. So on Tuesday we meet at Rockefeller University, and if there is a paper that is kind of okay, what are we gonna do here? Because as you said, maybe one reviewer is completely negative, the 2 reviewers are positive, and then you are kind of stuck there because you don't know. But generally we go with the major vibe of the review, and then if one of the reviewers is particularly negative, we overrule this. If we feel that the paper has value, and of course, if one of the reviewers pick up that there is a problem with statistics, for example, and the whole paper fell down, then we cannot overrule this. But if it's something, oh my God, they need to have absolutely this specific mouse model because otherwise it's not going to happen, I don't understand, so then it's a different thing. So then we can discuss together and say, okay, do you really think that this is a key point or not? If it's not a key point, we overrule, and that's it. Then the reviewer is not gonna be happy probably, so it's not gonna be probably a review for us. Super easy. But yes, but this is it happens every time, and I've also got just to reviewers. There are reviewers very professional, reviewers are a little bit more emotional. So if you get a rejection at the editorial level, like 2 months before, maybe a reviewer doesn't want to review for you, but that's life, maybe if you are lucky, next time you're going to be and sometimes I got, this sort of angry email, why should I review for you since you didn't, send out my manuscript, so it's a little bit weird. But we do have the room for like discussion. And also when we send out the decision, if, let's say in the decision letter, we always point out, especially we would like you to address this point. Of course, the idea is that if you can fulfill all the requests of the reviewers is fantastic, but if you cannot for whatever reason, please focus on these points, which are the ones that, especially for the stringent invite, is very important to, because it's like unless you do this, we are gonna publish it, so we have to tell you what are the points that we want you to address.
I wanted to ask you, so more and more the editorial filter is the hardest to get your paper out.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience as an editor, what would you say on the first glance of the paper? What are the things that you'd say is just authors big to note this because it's gonna be completely outside of the.
Of course, I have the feeling for JEM because that's where I am now. I would say, so novelty is definitely something that it's key. So if you know that your study is a follow-up study, sometimes you have to be aware that maybe it's not enough to go through for us. So we do check the literature, and also like in a cover letter, if you put like, oh my God, that's the key milestone of cancer, whatever, and then you look at the data, it's kind of not. So I think that in a sort of a rational and honest eye on the data would be good. But in terms of the paper, so I don't have really a specific of what not to do, but of course, if you manipulated a figure, don't send it to us because that's not nice. But I would say that a paper, in my experience, a paper should be logic. So if there is a logic in the paper, then it's clear how you go from one step to another, and so clarity is definitely what I would suggest the most. And I mean, I don't want to comment on the, please don't do this, because sometimes, I'm not judging science over anybody else, but sometimes, I get papers with, a bunch of RNA-seq in there, which is not really meaningful, but people just to put in one more figure, they just shovel it in, and then it's like data with no interpretation, and that's not what I would like to see in a paper. So if you have a big data set, please give it a sort of an idea out of it, because just to say, okay, well, that's the data set is not what I think. But I don't know. I think a lot of things goes into like a lot of factors together. It's like novelty is how the paper is maybe there is a little, the novelty is not 100%, but it's still answering that specific key point. So I'm sorry, I cannot.
No, it's okay. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.